Hey, welcome to Crossroads. Folks, Texas is running a check right now to ensure that illegal immigrants are not enrolled to vote. Now look, this goes beyond just checking for citizenship on election day. What are the big things people check for, right? They want to say, hey, do you check and see if they're American citizens? Texas is actually doing this beforehand. They're asking the federal government for citizenship information on around 454,289 people who are registered to vote in the state but have some questionable things with that. Now, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, he sent a public letter to Jadao, the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, this was October 7th, requesting this information. This is his public letter. Here's what he says. He says, the Office of the Attorney General requires the assistance of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, that's USCIS, as the state of Texas continues to fulfill its obligations to ensure compliance with federal and state election laws prohibiting non-U.S. citizens from voting. Now he notes, although federal and state law prohibits non-citizens from voting, federal law paradoxically creates opportunities for non-citizens to illegally register to vote while prohibiting states from requiring voters to have proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections. He said it's a common sense measure to identify illegal registration. In other words, some things don't line up here, right? On one side, it is against the law for them to allow people, right, if there's things in place that will make the election not fair, it's against the law. They can't do it. They note that while they cannot allow fraud to take place and they have to ensure the elections are run, honestly, what has happened is because of the system of getting your driver's license in different states, they have now coupled that with voter registration. And the check on whether you can actually legally register is just on the individual. And so there's nothing human to ensure that the individual registering for the driver's license is checking the right box and not illegally registering to vote. And that becomes problematic. Not only when people go to cast their votes on election day, it also becomes problematic if you do, universal mail-in ballots or mail-in ballots in general. Now, accordingly, he says, pursuant to the authority vested in me by Texas Election Code Section 273001B, I am actively investigating the extent to which non-citizens are illegally registered to vote or have voted in Texas. He says, in furtherance of these efforts, I have obtained from the Texas Secretary of State, the SOS, a list of approximately 454,289 Texas registered voters who have never had their citizenship verified. So he's checking. Now he states, this check is necessary because non-U.S. citizens lawfully present cannot legally vote, but can lawfully apply for and receive a driver's license or ID card. And consequently, I'm not asking for the verification of the citizenship of anyone whose voter registration records contains a driver's license or state-issued identification number. The people on the attached list did not use a driver's license or ID to register to vote, and that information could not be obtained from the Department of Public Safety. So their citizenship status has never been verified. In other words, they might be totally legal, but they don't know. Now he said, I require this information for the lawful purpose of investigating, quote, to determine if criminal conduct occurred in connection with an election. And again, he goes over the various laws at the federal and at the state levels. In other words, complying with Texas law, complying with federal law, and he's citing these particular laws to support these requests, saying that there is a legal basis to what he's doing. Now, again, in his interpretation, right? Now, he notes that under federal and state law, the USCIS, this department in charge of all this, is required legally to provide the information on citizenship when it is requested as a legal matter. And again, using the law as the justification for this, he has presented the legal case for it. We'll see what happens with it. Now, Epoch Times had some information on this as well. We noted the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services did not return a request for comment. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said in August that Texas removed more than 1 million people from its voter rolls since 2021, including more than 6,500 non-citizens. Of that group, nearly 2,000 had in fact voted, according to him. Now, Paxton's office, the Attorney General, planned to investigate the apparent illegal votes for potential legal action. It notes that Abbott's office said at the time that, and that some Republicans at the state and federal level have been focusing on the issue of non-citizen voting. Notably, Alabama Secretary of State Wes Allen, for instance, announced over the summer that thousands of people were flagged for removal from the voter rolls because the U.S. Department of Homeland Security had issued them non-citizen identification numbers, suggesting, well, maybe they're not U.S. citizens. And notes the U.S. Department of Justice later sued the state, alleging that it is not permitted to remove people from the voter rolls within 90 days of an upcoming election, even if they're registered as non-U.S. citizens, right? Now, it notes the Attorney General has given U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services until October 17 to comply with his request. And presumably, given the fact that, again, the federal level is arguing you can't remove anybody, even if they're not American citizens, from the voter rolls within 90 days of the election, and they'll sue you if you do, while at the same time the states are saying, according to state and federal law, that they cannot allow election to take place if there are illegal things taking place, well, that's going to be coming to a head in the courts probably. Now, the request in Texas also comes after a viral video was released. You might have seen it. There's a man at a grocery store in Texas, and he's offering to register non-U.S. citizens to vote. The individual recorded in this viral video said all they need is a driver's license. And he tells the individual, bring your friends, I'll register all of them. Right? All you need is a driver's license. And this brought to light some of the issues that states are facing on whether voter registration is secure when it's being packaged along with getting a driver's license. And now that illegal immigrants, these tens of millions or however many we have, are being made eligible to obtain driver's licenses, well, that raises some legitimate concerns, I'd say, over whether individuals are maybe mischecking a box or doing it intentionally. Now, this actually follows similar moves in Virginia. And in Virginia, back in August, Governor Glenn Youngkin, he signed Executive Order 35 aimed at updating the state's voter rolls. And that order basically required that non-citizens be removed from the voter roll if the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, if their records do not indicate U.S. citizenship. In other words, if you're not an American citizen, you cannot be registered to vote in the United States. And if you have, it's illegal. But they say according to the executive order, between January 2022 and July of 2024, 6,303 non-citizens were removed from the voter rolls. Now, a group of immigrants' rights groups and the League of Women Voters in Virginia also has filed a lawsuit accusing Glenn Youngkin, as well as the Virginia Attorney General, of attempting to illegally purge the state of its voter rolls. Now, again, they say within 90 days of the election, you cannot legally do that. But they're also going after them at the local level from these activist groups. Now, again, we'll see how this goes. We'll see how it turns out. Texas, given what we're seeing the pattern of in different states, they could see lawsuits there. I assume they've taken that into account. We will see. That could also be why they're going through the federal office to do this check, and they're also citing the local laws that would require them to do that. But it seems what's happening right now is you have contradictory laws. Again, there's a lot of laws at the state and local level that would require this, and there's evidence of violation of laws at the state and local level. But despite that, people are getting sued for abiding by the law because it contradicts another law. Again, you can't purge your voting rolls or change it within 90 days of the election. Now, folks, in other news, Hurricane Milton has made landfall in Florida. And in that context, hurricanes will likely have an impact on the 2024 elections. I'll be talking about this more after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Hurricane Milton made landfall in Florida last night as a Category 3 storm. Now, reports are that 4 people died, more than 3 million were left without power last night as widespread flooding does continue. And while the disaster is ongoing, we can get an estimate on the size and the impact from the estimated cost of damage. Now, briefly, the estimates came out before the storm landed. The impact of it was significantly less than many people believed it would be. Actually, I have a friend in Tampa. I was keeping in touch with him right up until now. As of this morning, he's a bit inland, but he was right where the storm hit. As of this morning, he told me on the phone that texting, because he doesn't have much, right? Told me that actually the damage is minimal, at least where he is. He's okay, and it does seem the area was not hit nearly as bad as people believed it would have been. Now, look, right now, right before this hit, the damages were estimated to cost anywhere from $50 billion to about $175 billion. Those estimates came out prior to landfall when it was believed this would be a lot worse than it seems to have been. I should note I have family on the other side of Florida, at the tail end of where the hurricane was hitting. They're also fine. It turned into a Category 1 at that time. They just got some heavy rain. Now, CNBC said this, though, right before it made landfall. They said Hurricane Milton's once-in-a-century potential could cause damage of more than $50 billion, with the potential to leave behind a devastation approaching $175 billion or more in a worst-case scenario, according to leading Wall Street analysts. And as the region has already been rocked, again, Helene barreled through the region 12 days ago and left behind devastation that Moody's on Tuesday estimated at some $11 billion. In other words, the previous hurricane, the one just recently, that caused about $11 billion in Florida, overall. Now, notes that in addition to the property damage, Moody's figures the National Flood Insurance Program likely will see losses approaching $2 billion. Because remember, it's not just the immediate damage, it's the long-term kind of recovering from it. And they also include, notably, flood insurance where people's homes were damaged or destroyed, and they have to insure the homes. Some areas are not going to get that, probably, especially when you get to like Appalachia. I mean, honestly, folks, whoever thought that Appalachia would get hit by a hurricane? Some of those folks, obviously, you're living in the mountains, you're probably not going to get flood insurance. A lot of them did not. I have some sources in the area I've talked to as well. From what I've been told, a lot of the flooding in Appalachia, especially when you get to the haulers, a lot of it was because the hurricane opened up a lot of the aquifers, is what I'm being told locally. And so, the underground water sources, and remember, you get to North Carolina, it's known for whitewater rafting. They have beautiful waterfalls. The mountains have water in them. The hurricane opened those up, and the aquifers are what caused a lot of the flooding. Terrible stuff for the people there. But unfortunately, a lot of them are not going to be included on the damage and repair costs because, unfortunately, a lot of them did not have insurance. We'll see what the federal government does to support them, especially right now. Now, look, another concerning factor we saw with Hurricane Milton is that the winds were starting tornadoes before it was making full landfall. And again, in Florida, where that just happened, the deaths, it seems, were not really caused by the hurricane itself. The deaths were mostly from the tornadoes. Again, and much lower toll than was expected, still tragic, but much lower toll than was expected. Now look, with that in context, the hurricanes, though, will also very likely impact the 2024 elections. It seems that as of right now, the hurricanes are the October surprise. A few other factors were in place. Again, Jack Smith, the special counsel, released the January 6 files on Trump. The court allowed it to take place. Even CNN and some others have noted the issues with that, not only the context of the timing with that right before the elections, but many of them were also disappointed that there wasn't really anything new. The January 6 files that were released are basically a rehash of the initial documents, of the initial story that they had. And so it doesn't do anything necessarily new, other than give media the chance to cover it again. The impact of that was very minimal, it seems, as of now on the Trump campaign. And honestly, especially with the timing of the hurricanes, people's focus is on this. It appears that a lot of the areas impacted by the hurricanes, though, are areas that are expected to vote Republican. And again, this is one of the big kind of wild cards with how the hurricanes are going to affect the elections. Politico said this. They say Hurricane Helene hit especially hard in heavy Republican areas of Georgia and North Carolina, a fact that could work to Donald Trump's disadvantage in the two swing states, they claim. They say research has shown that major disasters can influence both voter turnout and voter preference. Well, obviously, if you suffer a major disaster and you can't get to the polls, it might be harder to vote. We would assume they'll make things in place that make sure people can still vote, because he talks so much about voter access. Voter preference is the other part, though, and I think voter preference is the big argument here. They note that Helene has pushed this contest into novel territory. It's the first catastrophic event in U.S. history to hit two critical swing states within 6 weeks of a presidential election. The challenge for Trump, they say, the parts of western North Carolina and eastern Georgia that were flooded by the monster storms are largely Republican. In 2020, it says, he won 61% of the vote in the North Carolina counties that were declared a disaster after Helene. He won 54% of the vote in Georgia's disaster counties. Still relatively close, I should note, but Trump did win those. And they note that add to this, that the disaster, right, hitting Florida with Milton. Florida is also, it used to be a swing state. It's gone more pro-Trump since, the recent years. Florida used to be a swing state, so we'll see how this impacts it also. Now, look, of course, in terms of how this will impact the elections, in my take, there's a few factors at play. One of the big ones is going to be on any changes to voting laws in these states to ensure that people can still vote. In other words, voter access, the big buzzword we hear so much about. Now, look, despite the disasters, right, while still keeping things secure enough to ensure that people trust the integrity of the results. Let me show you this. Here's how Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been handling it so far. This was done before the hurricane that's right now, again, just ran through Florida. He issued an executive order in DeSantis, again in Florida. He authorized election changes for counties impacted by Hurricane Helene. We'll see if they have to do anything more for the recent one. The damage wasn't what they thought it would be, right? But that included the changes there. Relocating or consolidating any polling location if the supervisor finds that the continuing impacts of Hurricane Helene so warrant, as well as loosening restrictions that were in place for mail-in ballot requests, including accepting a request for a vote-by-mail ballot to be mailed to an address other than the requester's address on file in the Florida voter registration system. Now, that may raise some concerns for people, but if you understand that if you have to get a mail-in ballot and your house has been destroyed, you're obviously staying at a different residence. They're putting things in place to make sure you can still get your ballot. The concern with that is that, well, maybe people will use that for fraud. That is a legitimate concern. If you remember early voting and mail-in ballots, these were some of the big concerns in the 2020 election. Some of the things that people, I think, had questions about. I don't know if I'd say the most, but they were some of the biggest issues. It's a bit different this time around, though, because this time Republicans are also pushing for early voting and for mail-in ballots. And so it's not really a partisan thing anymore. It used to be, again, previously the Democrats were going very hard on it. The Republicans were like more legally fighting it. And so the Republicans in 2020, they didn't really get on board with the changes to the election system. Because again, instead of getting on board with them, they were challenging them to say whether they were legal or not. But now that they become basically the legal way of doing it, they're saying, hey, you changed the rules, we're going to play by the rules. And if this is what the rules are, so be it. I do think you will have some people who might have some issue with it still and question it legitimately, because the reason you normally don't do that is because of the risk of fraud. But given the fact that the disasters have now hit these areas, they are looking to implement these types of changes, which will ensure that people can still vote. Now, like the other big factor is going to be, on these disasters, right? In terms of how they're going to affect the elections, will be on whether believe that relief efforts are sufficient. Now, interestingly, if you were to read the arguments of Politico and a lot of other, media on the other side of the aisle, right, on the left, if you were to read what they're saying, they are basically saying that these disasters hitting Trump, more pro-Trump areas, especially in swing states, again, you're looking at North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, folks. All three of them are normally swing states. Florida's gone more hard conservative, I wouldn't say conservative, hard Trump, but normally would be considered a swing state as well. So this is technically actually three swing states. Hitting the counties where people tend to vote more Trump, and if they vote less Trump, it actually may swing the states for for Kamala. Now, the issue you're going to have in these areas, though, if you read what a lot of media are saying, is, Kamala went there and she gave speeches and Biden's giving federal resources, and they're saying that, because the federal government is responding and Kamala Harris, again, being the vice president, is there having a presence, that sends a positive message and that people will probably vote against Trump because of the presence of them. Trump on his side, although he's touring now some of these areas, Trump on his side created a GoFundMe and he's been raising money. Last I checked, it was about $7 million as of yesterday. The question is then, which side do they feel did more for them facing this disaster? I'd actually add more to it. Because what you're seeing now is the way that public opinion is shifting. Now, as I mentioned before, a big comparison for people is going to be looking at the services that illegal immigrants have been given. And given the fact that Trump and others argue that Kamala was the border czar, they deny it. A lot of media reported it that now deny it, notably. Technically, that wasn't her title, but she was in charge of some elements of it. Again, they will pin the blame of mass migration on her. Many people, again, mostly Trump voters, but remember, those are the ones in question here. A big point of criticism right now as we are speaking is the fact that FEMA had been involved in programs providing houses and other services to illegal immigrants. And so if they understand that illegal immigrants are eligible through some of these programs of up to like $16,000 every single month, free house, free food, free luxury hotel in New York City, well, people are going to say, well, what am I getting? And if they're facing, for example, empty store shelves where they can't buy food, and yes, that has been a big problem in North Carolina and parts of Florida. If they, for example, go to the gas station because they were trying to escape and there was no gas. I know people who were actually stuck in Tampa because they couldn't get out because there's no gas and no supplies, and the roads were packed also. When people look at that, and they even go to the homeless shelters because their house has been destroyed, and the homeless shelters are full, and they have no place to stay, what will the opinion be? What will the comparison be? Well, they'll say, why am I being treated this way? When my taxpayer dollars, which are normally there to ensure my well-being, are not being used for the interests of American citizens. Instead, they're being used to take care of people who are here illegally, who are violating the laws of this country. Where do you think they're going to vote? That is currently what a lot of the sentiment is. And you can get a sense of where the public debate is at based on who is making the allegations and who's on the attack and who's on the defense. And what do you see in the media right now? You see a lot of people on the attack, right? And the main narrative, the primary narrative, is again calling into question whether people's homes are going to be seized for them or land, because people are comparing this to Hawaii and Lahaina. Remember in Maui we had the fires and they got $750, never had their homes rebuilt, and a lot of them are going to lose their properties, forced to sell. A lot of people are wondering if that's going to be their fate as well. FEMA denies it. They say that that won't happen. Take it for what you will. They're also looking at, for example, the different programs people are eligible for. $750, gee, thanks. I'll get a hotel for 2 nights and a couple meals for my family. And then I guess I'll be homeless for a few months, right? That's what a lot of people are feeling right now. FEMA has clarified that you have to apply for it, but there are other things available. People are wondering, well, is there enough money? Because DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was saying they have enough money for the immediate relief, but not for the long term. They're denying that this is a fact, saying, well, we have enough immediately, using a play on words to kind of hide the fact that the issue is long-term, not immediate. People are wondering about their well-being and their futures right now. And again, you can look at the debate. This is the debate. It's not on, look at how great this response has been. The debate is on why was response delayed. You could argue because, well, they can't respond to an ongoing disaster. And some of these areas are hard to reach. But this is where the debate is. And I would actually say, my personal observation based on what I'm watching right now, I personally don't think the analysis suggesting this will swing against Trump is going to be true. Actually, I think frankly that in a lot of these areas it could swing the other way. I think the disasters actually could cause a push in the other direction. We will see what happens. But again, it's still unfolding, right? That being said, Just the News said this. White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre took the lead in trying to suggest it was a conspiracy theory to suggest the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, was using its resources to aid illegal immigrants. Republicans countered with surprise and shock that FEMA had routed $640.9 million in grants to nonprofits aiding immigrants or illegal immigrants, many of whom have crossed into the United States illegally. But the truth is both parties signed off on a budget deal earlier this year that increased funding for the new mission authorized in 2023 for FEMA, which is now reeling from a double-barreled hurricane crisis that has led to frustration over alleged missteps by the agency, FEMA, as millions of stranded and needy Americans in the Southwest await help. Now look, the technicality within the language is that FEMA, in terms of giving money to illegal immigrants, they technically did not divert any money for the illegal immigrants. Also, as Just the News notes, it was actually a bipartisan bill. Technically, Republicans and Democrats both voted together and passed that, meaning it was not partisan. Both sides of the aisle allowed that money to go to illegal immigrants. There's a separate budget delegated to disaster relief. And again, FEMA and their argument is saying, well, look, the budget for disaster relief is there. Congress voted and gave us money for the illegal immigrants. What are you blaming us for, right? That's their argument. But for a lot of Americans, the issue is not so much on whether it was, diverted or not, or who done it. The concern is that the money that they're paying taxes for and everything else was used to house and care for illegal immigrants in the first place. And another big issue for them, right, will be that many of them believe that illegal immigrants coming to the U.S. have been treated better than Americans who are currently suffering from disaster. So that's the argument. And remember, on the other side of the aisle, Donald Trump's main argument, one of his biggest campaign points, is against illegal immigration, mass illegal immigration. He's promising day one, mass deportations. And so given that, and keep in mind, although that sounds extreme, if you look at polling A lot of Democrats are on board with that as well. I've seen polling suggesting around 60% of Americans would actually support mass deportations, meaning that may be a winning narrative for him, especially in the context of this debate. But again, we'll see. Now, look, in other news, hospitals in the United States are facing a different type of crisis. They're running out of IV fluid, and they're now asking the federal government to declare a national emergency on this. I'll be talking about this, though, only on EpochTV.com. So those of you watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, come and join us on EpochTV.com. Not only will you get access to the rest of this show, you'll also get access to my live Q&A, again, where I answer your questions. So click on the link in the description below. Come join us on EpochTV.com. And before we continue, a quick announcement. I will not have a show tomorrow. I'm actually going to be going to Asheville, North Carolina. I found some individuals who can get me into some of the areas that are more difficult to reach there. I want to see it for myself. I want to have a look at the real situation on the ground. And so I'm going to be going into some of the more remote areas where the haulers are and find out what's really going on. So I'll be traveling. I will be back live on Monday, October 14th. So the only episode we won't have is just tomorrow. I will see you again on Monday. And again, we're still doing the rest of the episode today, so stick around. And before we go to EpochTV.com, let me show you a quick trailer for my documentary, The Final War, the 100-Year Plot to Defeat America, which you can also watch on EpochTV.com. And that said, I will see you for the rest of the episode in just a moment.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.